eventually evolved into the really big ones. And then they say they all went extinct about 65 million years ago. Here's another chart from that encyclopedia showing that dinosaurs and all the different reptiles, particularly crocodiles and alligators, they're all descended from a common ancestor, an archosaur. But I've found that evolutionists don't talk very much about where dinosaurs came from. They focus a lot more on what happened to them. And so this chart shows that they believe that dinosaurs evolved into birds. And in this particular case, the transitional form was Archaeopteryx, supposedly a part reptile, part bird. A few years ago, I was speaking in Montana, Bozeman, Montana, and during my Sunday afternoon, my host took me to the Montana State University's Museum of the Rockies, and they have one of the best collections of dinosaur fossils anywhere in America, one of the best even in the world. And so I walked through that museum and looking at the exhibits and the fossils, and of course under every fossil display there was a sign that talked about millions of years. And then as I was leaving the museum proper to go back into the lobby, I came to a television. And that television had a movie of birds, showing birds taking off, landing, preening themselves, splashing in the water. And above that TV screen, there was a sign. And I want to show you what that sign said. It said, "Birds are living dinosaurs." Well, I've got news for you, folks. Birds are birds. That's playing language games. But the evolutionists want us to believe that in one sense the dinosaurs went extinct, in another sense we've got dinosaurs in our backyard at the bird feeder. Richard Lewontin is a leading evolutionist at Harvard University, and he had the chart comparing a theropod dinosaur with birds, and he said, "Evolution of birds from reptiles can be considered a process of adaptation by which birds solved the problem of flight." Now, I like to read statements by evolutionists and then go back and read them slowly. Evolution of birds from reptiles can be considered a process of adaptation by which birds solved the problem of flight. Now think about that. If the birds solved the problem of flight, then Orville and Wilbur Wright wouldn't have had to do all those experiments if it was that easy. But if they were already birds, they already knew how to fly. But he says, he shows you that their bones are different. Reptiles have marrow. Their bones are similar to ours. Birds are have largely hollow bones with that crisscrossing structure, which scientists, engineers have copied to make strong, lightweight bridges. Their forelimbs are similar. They have the same bones. In fact, they have the same bones that we have in our arms, but the bird arm is a lot longer than the dinosaur arm. Their sternum is similar, but it is noticeably different, and their skin covering is different. Dinosaurs and reptiles have scales or scutes, and birds have feathers. So dinosaur skin has been found fossilized, and it is similar to crocodile skin or to turtle scutes. And that's very different from birds' feathers. And you can see that with the naked eye, but you might say, well, under the microscope, they're really similar. Well, no, they're not. Here's a bird feather magnified under the microscope a few thousand times. It's got that system of barbs and barbules, and when you crank up the power a little bit more, you find out that that little structure there is on a hinge, and it swings over onto this other part. So when you pull down the feather, it pulls apart. When you go up the feather, it zips things together again. Very, very complex structure, and totally different from the structure of scutes and dinosaur skin. There's another difference between dinosaurs and birds, and that is the breathing system. Dinosaurs are reptiles, and reptiles have a two-way system and a diaphragm. So the air goes into the lungs and goes back out the same way. But a bird has a totally unique lung system. No other kinds of creatures have what a bird has. It's a one-way system with no diaphragm, which allows for a continuous flow of air through that lung, which makes flight possible because they've just continually got air flowing through. Now think about this. How do you change a two-way system into a one-way system and have the creature survive? You can only miss a few breaths, and then you're done. Well, the evolutionists have proposed two theories for the origin of flight. One is the ground-to-air theory. The idea here is that a reptile was running along. He was trying to catch some food. His arms were pretty flabby. They were flapping in the wind. The scales got frayed on the edges, and he took off. Of course, do you realize how long he would have to run? I mean, he'd starve to death. So that theory's been discarded. A more popular theory is what I call the air-to-ground theory. The idea here is that there was a reptile up in the tree, and he thought, you know, there's got to be a lot faster way to get from this branch on this tree over to that branch on that tree than to crawl all the way down the tree, across the ground, and up the other tree. So he just jumped. And, of course, the first experiment would have been a disaster. Because if he survived, he would have thought, you know, that was really stupid. I'm not doing that again. And if he didn't survive, his son would have said, Dad was really dumb. But the evolutionists want us to believe that dinosaurs evolved into birds. November 1999, feathers for T-Rex, the National Geographic asks. New bird-like fossils are missing links in dinosaur evolution. Notice the verb, are. Not might be, not could be, are. Well, you open up the article, and they've got a picture of this dino bird. And they say, we can now say that birds are theropods just as confidently as we say that humans are mammals. Well, what's a theropod? Well, they don't show you in the magazine, so I'm going to show you. That's a theropod. And once you see that picture, you see there's a problem. Because that theropod has very short front legs, whereas the dino bird in the picture has very long wings. But they said, we're just as confident that birds are theropod dinosaurs as we are that humans are mammals. Well, are humans mammals? Yes. We have hair. We give birth to live young. We feed our young milk. We're mammals. We're not reptiles. We're not birds. We're more than mammals because we're made in the image of God, but we're in the mammal category. Well, they say we're just as confident that birds are theropods. Well, they said that in November 1999. But in March of 2000, just a few months later, National Geographic published a letter to the editor by a Chinese paleontologist who, in so many words, said, I hate to inform you of this, but the fossil on which you base that article was a fraud. It was parts of a bird fossil and parts of a reptile fossil very cleverly glued together by Chinese farmers. Well, National Geographic had egg on their face. They commissioned an independent investigator who wrote an article in October of 2000, stuck in the back of the magazine, no full-color pictures, hardly any large font statements. I wonder how many people who read the article in November 99 ever saw the article in 2000. But in 2003, Discover magazine interviewed Alan Fiducia. Dr. Fiducia is a world expert on birds. He's an evolutionist at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And they asked him this question: what about all the other evidence for feathered dinosaurs, besides the National Geographic one, which was shown to be a fraud? Dr. Fiducia said, when we see actual feathers preserved on specimens, we need to carefully determine if we are looking at secondarily flightless birds that have retained feathers and only superficially resemble dinosaurs, or if the specimens are in fact related to dinosaurs. That's a difficult issue to deal with right now, given the existence of fake fossils. Oh, well, that raises another question. So far, only one feathered dinosaur, Archaeoraptor, that was the one in National Geographic, has been publicly acknowledged as a forgery. You think there are others? Dr. Fiducia. Archaeoraptor is just the tip of the iceberg. There are scores of fake fossils out there, and they have cast a dark shadow over the whole field. When you go to these fossil shows, it's difficult to tell which ones are faked and which ones are not. I have heard that there is a fake fossil factory in northeastern China, in Liaoning province, near the deposits where many of these recent alleged feathered dinosaurs were found. Now, Dr. Fiducia is not a taxi driver with an 8th grade education. He's one of the top evolutionist bird experts in the world. And he says when you look at these fossils, it's difficult to tell which ones are fake and which ones are genuine. Another paleontologist and evolutionist said this: "At the moment, I don't trust any of these specimens until I see the x-rays. The whole commercial market for fossils has gotten riddled with fakery." Well, Fiducia went on in that article with Discover magazine to say, journals like Nature, which is one of the leading science journals in England, don't require specimens to be authenticated, and the specimens immediately end up back in China, so nobody can examine them. They may be miraculous discoveries, they may be missing links, as they are claimed, but there's no way to authenticate any of this stuff. Unless you spend a lot of money and fly to China, and then hope that the Chinese Communist government will let you actually see the fossils. But they keep announcing that they have found feathered fossils, proving birds evolved from dinosaurs. But the problem of fake fossils in China is serious and growing. Rather than being excavated by paleontologists on fossil digs, most of the region's fossils are pulled from the ground by desperately poor farmers and then sold on to dealers and museums. That fake fossil that National Geographic based that article on in 1999, they paid $80,000 for that fossil at a fossil show. But I can guarantee you, the farmers in China didn't get the $80,000. Right. But even if they got $100, it was probably a lot of money for them. Though many more fossils are being discovered, they are collected and prepared in a way that destroys much of the scientific information. What layer was it found in? What was it found with? Another, much more serious problem, however, is posed by faked and manipulated specimens. It sounds crude, but even the experts have to look carefully to detect the trickery when master forgers have been at work. So, to change a reptile into bird, you've got to not only develop feathers, change the breathing system, change the skeletal system, the digestive and nervous system, construct bills and beaks, master the art of nest building. Now, we have come to the conclusion that dinosaurs did lay eggs in nests because we have found eggs in clutches that look like nests. But they didn't make nests in trees. That's an additional skill. They have to learn to fly and navigate, and there are some birds that spend the summer in Greenland, and as it starts to get cold, they make the non-stop flight all the way to the south tip of South America. There's some other birds that spend the summer in Alaska, and as it gets cold, they make the non-stop flight all the way to Hawaii, and in the process, they lose 60% of their body weight, but they ate up before they left. How did those birds figure out how to navigate? Well, scientists aren't sure. They think maybe the magnetic field of the earth, maybe the sun, but on a cloudy day, how do they do that? And then they got to develop sound-producing organs and learn songs, and different bird species have a different song. And then you've got to shrink the dinosaur to make the first bird, and shrink the first bird to make most of the other birds. And here's a chart or diagram from some evolutionists showing the steady shrinkage over 50 million years. Now, if you think that the animals just gradually got smaller over 50 million years, you've got a vivid imagination. That's ridiculous. And so I submit to you the idea that dinosaurs or any kind of reptile evolved into a bird is impossible. But evolutionists are doing a good job of convincing the world that they did. This is a chart from a dinosaur book that I have in my office. It was produced in conjunction with the British Museum of Natural History. And you can see that you've got crocodiles and pterosaurs, flying reptiles, birds, and Saurischian and Ornithischian dinosaurs. And you'll notice that there are two colors of lines on this tree, evolutionary tree, yellow and gray. Well, what does that mean? Well, yellow indicates solid fossil evidence. Okay, well then what's the gray? Well, that's not solid fossil evidence. That's not fossil evidence at all. So let's get rid of the gray line so we can see the fossil evidence clearly. And that looks like different kinds of dinosaurs have always been different kinds of dinosaurs. Birds have been birds. Crocodiles have been crocodiles. And then you'll notice up at the top of the chart there, at the 65 million year mark, all the dinosaurs go extinct, but we still have birds and crocodiles. So what happened? Well, the evolutionists have proposed a lot of different theories for the extinction of the dinosaurs. They ate too much, they didn't eat enough, they had a severe case of diarrhea or gas or, all kinds of ideas. But the dominant view today is a giant asteroid hit the Earth, and most of the evolutionists think it was in the Gulf of Mexico, and that caused the extinction. But Peter Makovitsky is an expert on dinosaurs at the Chicago Field Museum. He says this: the truth is, scientists don't know, really, what happened to the dinosaurs. Each hypothesis on its own doesn't fit the pattern very well. Was extinction gradual or sudden? The lack of data doesn't allow us to answer the question. So they're still puzzled. They don't really know where dinosaurs came from. They don't really know what happened to them. And they certainly don't know that dinosaurs evolved into birds. So let's use the Bible to explain the dinosaurs. And the first question we have to ask is, well, when did God create the dinosaurs? And the Bible is very clear. In Genesis 1, we have the 6 days of creation, and the Bible tells us that God created the dinosaurs on the 6th day of creation. And you say, well, now, wait a minute. I've read Genesis 1. It doesn't say anything about dinosaurs. Well, it doesn't say the word dinosaur, but it doesn't say the word dog or elephant or hippo either. Amen. But I know they were all made on day 6 because God said he made all the land animals on day 6. And dinosaurs are land animals, so I know he made the dinosaurs on day 6. God expects us to use our brain when we're reading the Bible. But I've got photographic evidence anyway. Here's a rare photo of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Well, wait a minute. That's just as good as any evolutionist picture. Except mine's based on truth, the eyewitness testimony of the Creator. Well, then we ask a question. The T-Rex had teeth up to 6 inches long, serrated edges, so what did he eat on the day he was created? Well, the evolutionists would say anything he jolly well pleases. But we want to think biblically. How would this dinosaur originally have been described? Would he have been a plant eater, a meat eater, a scavenger, eating dead things, or a plant and a meat eater? Well, if we're thinking biblically, we have to say, originally, the dinosaurs were all plant eaters. Because you see, at the end of day 6, after God made man and all the land animals, God said to Adam, I've given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat or food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I've given every green herb for meat or for food. And it was so. So man and the animals were all originally vegetarian. And there are lots of plant material that you would need sharp teeth to eat. It's tough to cut a tomato with a dull knife. And so those sharp teeth could have been very useful for eating plant material. But then people object, yes, but sharp teeth are proof that the creature ate meat. No, sharp teeth are proof that the creature had sharp teeth. You can go on the internet, on YouTube, and watch an alligator eating a watermelon. And research recently has revealed that 3/4 of crocodilian species eat fruit frequently and intentionally. Here you have the skulls of 6 different kinds of bats with different diets. One of those skulls goes with a bat that eats only blood. One eats only fish. One eats only fruit. One set of jaws goes with the bat that eats insects. One nectar and pollen, but only one of those 6 eats small mammals. So which one is it? Well, if we never saw any of these alive, all we had was fossil skulls, we'd think, well, probably all of them are meat eaters, but it's only B. Here you have 2 skulls that are remarkably similar. Sharp canines to rip into things, good molars to chew on things. But the top one is a fruit bat that eats only fruit. The bottom one is a wolf that eats meat. Squirrels have sharp teeth and sharp claws, but they're almost strictly vegetarian. And here's an interesting sign from a zoo in Sydney, Australia. Although all bears have teeth designed for eating meat, their diet consists mainly of plants. Well, now think about that. If their diet consists mainly of plants, why don't we say they have teeth to eat plants? That's what they eat. And there's one bear that has very sharp teeth and sharp claws, and it's strictly vegetarian. That's the panda bear. And it needs those sharp teeth and claws to eat that tough bamboo. So on day 6, the animals and the people were all vegetarian. Well, then people ask, well, if dinosaurs really lived with people, why don't I find the word dinosaur in the Bible? Well, it's easy to explain why the word is not in the King James Bible, because the King James was translated in 1611. But the word dinosaur was not invented until 1841 by Sir Richard Owen, great British scientist. So that's 230 years after the King James was translated. But there is a Hebrew word in the Old Testament. It's the Hebrew word tanin. It's often translated in the King James with the word dragon. And there are a number of verses, but for sake of time, we just want to look at one passage that doesn't use that word, but does describe an interesting creature. In Job chapter 38 through 41, after God had listened to Job and his friends analyzing why Job had suffered all these terrible things, God then spoke to Job and said, okay, Job, if you're so smart, let me ask you some questions. And he starts to ask him a lot of questions about different kinds of creatures. Creatures that Job obviously saw. In fact, many times God asks the question, now, do you know about this? And do you know about this? And have you seen this creature give birth? And then he comes in chapter 40 to talk about Behemoth. Behold now Behemoth, which I made with thee. He eateth grass as an ox. So he's a vegetarian. Lo now, his strength is in his loins, and his force is in the navel of his belly. So he's got really strong leg muscles and stomach muscles. His bones are strong pieces of brass. His bones are like bars of iron. He is the chief of the ways of God. So he's got really strong bones, and he's evidently the greatest land creature that God made. Chapter 41 goes on to talk about Leviathan, which was apparently the greatest sea creature God made. So what creature was this? Well, I left out one verse. That's verse 17, which says, he moveth his tail like a cedar tree. In the original 1611 King James, it had a marginal note saying, or the elephant, as some think. And in the Ryrie KJV Study Bible, he says, usually believed to be the hippopotamus. But whoever wrote those notes wasn't paying careful attention to this verse, or they hadn't been to the zoo lately. Because the cedar of Lebanon is one of the largest trees in the Middle East. And when that moves in a heavy wind, it doesn't go like that. It's going to move really slowly. So here's a tail like a cedar tree. And have any of you ever seen an elephant with a tail like that? No. Have you ever seen a hippo with a tail like that? No. But there are creatures that had tails like that. They're called sauropod dinosaurs, the ones with the long necks and long tails. And just in case you haven't been to the zoo lately, that is an elephant tail. And when it moves, it goes like that. And that is a hippo tail. And when it moves, it goes like that. And if you see it start to move like that, you would be wise to stand some distance away, because there will be something else moving from that same location. And it will not be pretty. So on day 6, we had hippos and elephants and dinosaurs. We still have hippos and elephants, so what happened to the dinosaurs? Well, we come back to the Bible. The Bible tells us that God created a perfect world where there was no sin, there was no death, no disease. Man sinned against God, and that brought the judgment of God on the whole creation, not just on man. But not only do the evolutionists deny what the Bible says about creation, they also deny what the Bible says about the fall of Adam and the curse. And they say, as long as there's been life, there's always been death. As long as there will be life, there will be death. From the very first microbe, a bacterium that died all the way through all the different animals, there's been death for millions and millions of years. But in Genesis 3, the Bible says the first creature that God judged was the serpent who deceived Eve. And he said, because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust thou shalt eat all the days of thy life. So God cursed the animals. And then we come to the New Testament. And Paul says in Romans 8 that the whole creation is now groaning in bondage to corruption, in slavery to corruption. So we don't live in that original very good creation. We now live in a fallen creation. And we don't know if it happened instantly or gradually, but some creatures began to be carnivores. And creatures started to die and have disease, and evolutionists have found evidence of brain tumors, arthritis, cancer in dinosaur bones. In fact, there are some medical schools in the United States that use cancer in dinosaur bones to teach medical students how to recognize cancer, because the cancer in dinosaur bones looks just like cancer in humans. So, did God create a world where there would be millions of years of creatures dying and suffering all of this disease? That doesn't fit with what the Bible says. Well, the world became very, very evil. So evil that the Bible says the thoughts and intentions of the human heart were only evil continually. So God said, I'm going to destroy the world. And he said, no, I want you to build an ark. And I want you to take 2 of every kind of land, animal, and bird. Not 2 of every species, 2 of every kind. And I hope that you'll come back tonight, because we'll talk about the difference there. And we'll talk about the evolutionary view of the origin of living things versus the biblical view. And if you've understood what I've said so far, you'll be able to understand what I talk about tonight. Because the ideas are not complicated, and I don't use complicated language. So he took 2 of every kind. That means he took 2 of every kind of dinosaur onto the ark. And as soon as we say that, Christians object and say, well, now, wait a minute. There's no way you could fit the dinosaur into the ark. Well, you couldn't fit that dinosaur in that ark. But that wasn't the ark. And so we need to get that idea out of our heads and out of our children's heads. And that's why we built the ark in northern Kentucky, to help people understand how big that boat was, according to the dimensions giving it in Genesis. And how many of you have been to the ark, by the way? A few of you. Okay. It was a big boat. There was a lot of room. But people still object and say, well, yeah, but there's no way you could fit all the animals in the ark. Well, we need to know some facts about dinosaurs. First fact is that not all dinosaurs were big. Some dinosaurs were no bigger than a chicken at full maturity. And second thing we know is that dinosaurs are reptiles, and reptiles never stop growing. So here you have a little itty-bitty alligator coming out of the egg, and you can stick your finger in that mouth, and that little itty-bitty alligator will tickle your finger. But eventually that little bitty alligator is going to grow up into a big one, and you don't want to put anything in that mouth. The largest dinosaur eggs we've ever found are only a little bit bigger than an American football. So the great T-Rex, the great Apatosaurus, they were once small. And then scientists have studied those big sauropod dinosaurs, and they they studied their bones and the growth patterns in their bones and compared them to the growth patterns of other creatures. And they found that they didn't grow very much the first few years of their life. And then they had a growth spurt, and then the rest of their life they didn't grow very much. So if Noah took the animals on the ark when they were young, they would be small. And most of their growth would be after they came off the ark. But as soon as we say that, people object and say, well, now wait a minute. You're just trying to make it easy for Noah. No, think about it. First of all, Noah didn't go out and collect the animals. Genesis is very clear. God brought the animals to Noah. But secondly, God would not bring the big T-Rex, the big Apatosaurus to the ark. Why? Because that would be Grandma and Grandpa. They're not going to have any reproductive potential after the flood. So he's going to bring teenager T-Rex, teenager Apatosaurus, and they would be much smaller. Then we need to know that evolutionists say that there are about 550 genera of dinosaurs and about 1,000 species. In fact, almost every new dinosaur discovery gets a new species name, and evolutionists have multiplied the number of species. But when they find dinosaur fossil evidence, they generally do not find the whole skeleton. They might find just a couple of bones. And so a scientist in China might give a certain genus and species name to that dinosaur, and it might be a couple decades later when an American scientist finds some bones, and he gives it a different genus and species name, and then years later they find more bones, and they say, oh, well, that's the same dinosaur as this one over here. So here's an example. Those two skulls are remarkably similar. The top one is just a little flattened from the bottom one. But they have not only different species names, which is the second name in the two-word name, but they have a different genus. But there's less variation between those two dinosaurs than there are between the skulls of those dogs. And they're all the same species. That's Canis lupus, the domestic dog. So Noah didn't take two of every one of those ceratops on the ark. The variation in those ceratops is either the result of genetic variation built into the created kind or mutations. He just took two ceratops. And he didn't take all those dogs on the ark. We know he didn't take those on the ark because they're the result of artificial breeding over the last 300 to 400 years. He just took two of the dog kind. And we'll talk more about the created kinds tonight, so I hope you come back. So as a result, creation scientists who've studied this think there were only 50 to 80 kinds of dinosaurs on the ark. Some of them were small at full maturity. All of them were small when they were young. There was plenty of room on the ark for the animals and all the plant material they took for food. And anything not in the ark died. Creatures which could run to higher ground would, but eventually there wouldn't be any higher ground. And they would be swept away by those floodwaters, and many of them would be ripped apart and buried in sediments. And so we would expect from this event that there would be billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. And that's exactly what we find. And so Tim Clary is a PhD geologist at the Institute for Creation Research. He's an expert on dinosaurs, having done a lot of research and written a book on the subject. He says, we have repeatedly shown that dinosaurs are commonly found mixed with marine fossils across the globe and are often buried in so-called marine rocks. Well, dinosaurs don't live in the ocean. They got swept away into the ocean by the floodwaters. And so we find dinosaur bones in sediments that were deposited by water. And sometimes we do find a lot of a skeleton. But that creature could not be fossilized by just dying of old age along a well-trodden path and slowly getting buried a millimeter of sediment per year. Because scavengers would come and eat the bones. And we wouldn't find fossilized skin like we do if the fossilization process was slow over hundreds or thousands of years. Because again, scavengers would come and eat it all. And we wouldn't find well-preserved footprints of dinosaurs where you can even see the skin detail. If you've ever been to the ocean, you've seen that your footprints get washed away pretty fast by the waves coming up onto the land. You've got to bury that footprint really quickly to get that kind of preservation. And it's not been uncommon to find dinosaurs like this, theropods, with their head thrown back, and the scientists interpret that as death in water, trying to survive. But then people say, well, yeah, but dinosaurs and people couldn't have lived together at the same time because we don't find dinosaurs and humans buried in the same rock layer. Well, that's easy to explain. I can't imagine any human beings running next to a dinosaur trying to escape the floodwaters. They probably didn't even live near each other. We don't have any fossil humans in the same bone layers with dinosaurs. And people say, well, and we don't have any living dinosaurs today, so that's proof positive. From the time that the dinosaurs disappeared in the fossil record, it's about 65 million years, they say. There are no human fossils in those layers. That's proof positive. Dinosaurs and people never lived together. Well, no, it's not proof of that at all. Because there is a creature, a fish, called the coelacanth. It was known only from the fossil record, and the highest rock layer where the coelacanth was found is the same layer where the dinosaurs disappeared. Above that, 65 million years, supposedly, of rock layers, no coelacanth. So they said, well, it went extinct with the dinosaurs. They said that until 1938, when they found the coelacanth swimming off the coast of Madagascar in 400 feet of water. And they've since found coelacanths off the coast of Indonesia and Japan. And when they compare the living coelacanth with the fossil, it's virtually unchanged in supposedly 65 million years. Now, we don't find humans with coelacanths in the fossil record. Why? Well, because humans don't live at 400 feet below sea level. I wouldn't expect them to be together. Well, why did they become extinct if they did? Well, there's lots of possible causes. Man overhunted them, perhaps. Man destroyed their habitat. Man brought disease into their population. Or rapid climate changes in the post-flood world after as the earth was recovering from that catastrophic event. But they might be still alive. Remember the coelacanth. Every year, scientists are finding creatures on the earth that they didn't know existed before. And there are some deep jungles of Central Africa, Brazil, Papua New Guinea, where there have been reports of sighting creatures that when the natives describe them to a Westerner, it sounds like they've seen a dinosaur. Now, those are just testimony. And of course, the Western world, any evolutionists will say, well, those are stupid tribesmen. They don't know anything. But they could still be alive. But if they did become extinct, when did they become extinct? Well, there's a lot of evidence that it wasn't very long ago. Mary Schweitzer was a PhD student at the University of Montana State University, and she was in the lab with her lab assistant looking at a slice of T-Rex bone under the microscope. And the lab assistant said, Mary, you've got to come over and look at this. I think I see red blood cells in that dinosaur bone. And so she went over and looked, and she said, it was exactly like looking at a slice of modern bone. But of course I couldn't believe it. I said to the lab technician, the bones, after all, are 65 million years old. How could blood cells survive that long? Yeah, that's a great question, because blood cells will break down very rapidly. But notice, why couldn't she believe it? Because she's locked into the millions of years. If she questioned the millions of years, her scientific career would be over. I've been told that she is a professing evangelical Christian, but she can't question the millions of years. That was 1993. She has since found soft tissue in dinosaur bones. And here's a report from Discovery Channel on television in 2005.
Not going to believe this. When she picked up a small piece to stop the reaction by putting it in water, it stretched and it sproinged and it moved all over the place. So we knew we had something pretty unusual.
It appears to be soft tissue. When they look at neighboring parts of the bone, they're even more surprised.
Out popped the blood vessels, and they were pretty incredible. And I said, I don't believe it, that's not possible, we need to do it again and again. It's one of those just goosebump-inducing scientific moments, that's all I can say. And they don't really happen very often.
Blood vessels should not exist in fossilized bone. Many scientists believe organic molecules can't last more than 100,000 years. Yet Schweitzer's bone is 68 million years old.
I think the presence of soft tissues and cells indicates there's a process going on that we didn't have a clue about. So I think it means that we have to kind of rethink the whole chemical process of making a bone turn into a fossil.
What about rethinking the age of the fossil? They can't. The scientific community is locked into the millions of years. Now, evolutionists will never try to date a dinosaur bone with carbon-14 because the maximum you can date anything with carbon-14 is about 100,000 years because carbon-14 decays very rapidly back into nitrogen. But creationists said, hey, if there's bone there, if there's soft tissue, then we should be able to date that with carbon-14, and they have found measurable amounts of carbon-14. Now, these carbon-14 ages aren't the correct age because they're based on false assumptions that we can't, at this point, correct. The actual age would be much less, but there shouldn't be any carbon-14 in those bones at all if those bones are 65 or more million years old. Well, there's more evidence that dinosaurs and people lived together. Many cultures of the world have dragon legends. Of course, the Chinese are the most famous, but they're not the only ones. The flag of Wales has a dragon on it. And there is a petroglyph in Natural Bridges National Monument that bears striking resemblance to a dinosaur, specifically a brontosaurus with a long tail and neck and small head and all. Here it is. There are carvings of other animals in this same rock formation. Here's a scientist bringing out the carving. That looks a lot like a dinosaur. How they think that Native American Indians about 2,000 years ago carved the other animals. Well, how in the world did they carve this if they'd never seen the creature? And then there's a temple in Cambodia, a very famous temple in the jungles of Cambodia. It's from the 12th century after Christ, so just about 800 years ago. And carved in the stone entrance, one of the entrances to this temple, are a lot of different animals that we readily recognize, and also a stegosaurus. Now, how in the world did the artist know how to carve that if he'd never seen the creature? The first dinosaur bones, as far as we know, were discovered in the early 1800s, just a little over 200 years ago. And the first bones, they just found one bone and they didn't know what it was. If you don't have the whole skeleton, how do you know to make those diamond plates on the back? And then there's a brass plate in the lid of the tomb of Bishop Bell, an Anglican bishop who died in 1496. He's buried in the floor of Carlisle Cathedral. And if you go there, you won't see this because they have a carpet over the cover. But one of our creationist friends went to the cathedral and asked the janitor, could you pull that carpet back? I've heard there's something interesting to look at on that cover. And he pulled it back, and that brass band around the lid has creatures carved into it. A bird, some fish, a dog, and what looks like two long-necked dinosaurs, which are very similar to images in Egypt, in Mesopotamia, that are very similar to a brontosaurus. How did the artist draw those if they'd never seen the creature? And then we have what we call living fossils. These are fossil creatures that supposedly went extinct, and then they find them alive. And so the Wallamai pine was considered a living fossil. It was said to have gone extinct 150 million years ago because as they came up through the rock layers, the layers that they date at 150 million years was the last layer where they found this tree. Above that, no Wallamai pine, so it went extinct. Well, they said that until 1994, when they found the Wallamai pine growing in a secluded valley west of Sydney, Australia, about 100 miles from where they found the fossils. And when they compared the living tree with the fossil, it was virtually identical. Hadn't evolved in 150 million years. Well, they are keeping that valley secret. They don't want people going in there and destroying those precious trees. And so this is a little display in a little museum. And at the bottom they had a sign that said, "The discovery of the Wallamai pine is the equivalent of finding a small dinosaur still alive on the earth." Well, I would ask, why wouldn't it be equivalent to finding a really large dinosaur still alive on the earth? They might still be alive. Well, we live in a world that says the Bible can't be trusted in this scientific age. And why do they say that? Well, it's because we have cell phones and refrigerators and automobiles and airplanes. That's why you can't believe the Bible. No, that's not why people don't believe the Bible. It's because of the teaching of evolution in millions of years, and ape men and dinosaurs evolving into birds. It's because of the books that are brainwashing the children. It's because of TV or videos like Lost World. It's because of all the natural history museums that are teaching evolution in millions of years. And that's why we built our creation museum, so that people could hear the truth. But most of the world says, I'd like to see what the church can do about this. Because they think that evolution has blown holes in the Bible. It's completely untrustworthy. And most of the church around the world has just ignored the issue. And they said, well, don't worry about that. I mean, that's in Genesis. Don't worry about that. It doesn't matter when the dinosaurs lived or whatever. The Bible's not about dinosaurs. Just trust in Jesus. But you see, folks, if people can't trust this book, they can't trust the gospel in this book. And if they think that Genesis, which is foundational to the gospel, is mythology, then they're not going to believe the gospel that is based on that truth. And so that's why we've got a lot of resources about dinosaurs. This is for preschool kids. We've got a video with Ken Ham and Buddy Davis on dinosaurs for little kids, grade school kids. We've got answers books for the grade school kids. Each one answers 20 questions with a one-page answer. And one of those is all about dinosaurs and the flood. And then we've got answers books for teenagers and adults. And in the first volume, we have a chapter on dinosaurs. And we've got pocket guides out there. And one of those is just a small little booklet to get people started. One of those is on dinosaurs. And we have another small booklet that fits in your shirt pocket that you can leave at a restaurant or give to a neighbor who doesn't really want to read very much, just to get them started. And so any books or DVDs out there that we have, you can combine those together and make your own combinations and save a lot of money that way. We also have a lot of articles on our website about dinosaurs and responding to evolutionist claims. In our Creation Museum, we have about 60 life-size dinosaurs sculpted by our own Buddy Davis. We have dinosaur fossils. Our prized possession is Ebenezer the Allosaur. We found 97% of the skull and over 50% of the skeleton. He's 30 feet long, 10 feet high. He's been professionally prepared and valued at over $1 million. And our geologist wants to do CAT scans and study his skull, as his other research will allow. And then out at our Ark Encounter, we have some dinosaurs in cages. And so I encourage you to pick up a brochure about the Ark in the museum. So we like to say dinosaurs are missionary lizards. They teach us the gospel, because the reason that we know about dinosaurs is because of fossils. And what are fossils? They're dead things. Where did death come from? That's because of sin. What has God done about the sin problem? He sent the Lord Jesus Christ to pay the penalty for sin. And one day he's coming again, and he's going to restore the creation, and there won't be any more death and disease and suffering. And so we use the Bible to explain the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs and man were created on the sixth day. There were thousands. That was thousands of years ago, not millions. They were all originally vegetarian. There was no death before the fall. And the fossils are from Noah's flood. So we need to build all of our thinking on the Word of God. Not just our thinking about morality or religion or the gospel, but all of our thinking, because the Bible doesn't answer every question, but the truth it does give us enables us to think correctly about every question that we encounter. So that's the dinosaurs. Pastor, turn it back to you.
Man, do we appreciate that. What wonderful information that we can use. And